She hesitated, feeling a strange mixture of curiosity and unease. Lucas had always been the quiet one, the type who observed more than he spoke. But tonight there was a difference. His expression wasn't distant, it was deliberate, attentive, and it unnerved her in a way she couldn't quite name. "I wasn't expecting to see you here," she said, stepping closer to the counter. She felt her palms grow warm, despite the cold that had followed her inside. He smiled faintly, brushing his hair back. "I could say the same. Thought I'd grab a late cup before closing. You come here often?" "Not really," Laura admitted. She glanced around the room, noticing the familiar comfort of worn tables and the soft hum of a heater in the corner. "Just felt like walking, I guess." Lucas nodded, but she could tell he wanted to say more. The pause stretched between them, carrying an unspoken weight. For a fleeting second, she remembered all the times they'd brushed past each other at gatherings, exchanging polite smiles, but never much else. And here they were, alone in a quiet cafe, with the rest of the world temporarily paused outside the glass doors. She found herself wondering how many words had been left unsaid between them, how many small chances had been ignored because life had insisted on speed and distance. Her heart tapped a little faster, and she felt a flutter of anticipation, even though she didn't know why. Lucas cleared his throat. "Do you want some coffee? On the house?"
"Since it seems fate brought you in tonight." Laura laughed softly, a sound that surprised even her. "Fate, huh? That's a little dramatic for a Tuesday night." He raised an eyebrow, teasingly serious. "Maybe, or maybe life just gives us these little nudges when we least expect them." She nodded, feeling a twinge of warmth, as if the cafe itself had wrapped her in a protective bubble. They moved to a small corner table, and the conversation started cautiously, as if testing the waters. Laura noticed the way he listened, genuinely, when she spoke, not just polite nods, but attentive, focused. It had been so long since anyone had made her feel this way, quietly seen in the midst of casual conversation. The minutes passed unnoticed. She didn't even realize how late it had gotten until she glanced at her watch. The moment was fleeting but profound, like a pause in time where the world outside ceased to exist. As she gathered her things to leave, she felt a lingering hesitation, the kind that hinted at unfinished stories. Lucas's eyes met hers again, and she thought I saw a flicker of shared understanding, a silent acknowledgement that tonight had mattered. If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. And yet, as she stepped back into the cold night, her mind buzzed with questions she hadn't expected to ask. What had she really hoped for tonight? And more importantly, what would tomorrow bring, now that she had seen him like this? Different, yet familiar. The wind brushed her face, and she realized that the warmth of the cafe still lingered in her chest. But there was something else, too, a quiet pull toward uncertainty, a thought that refused to leave. The night had only just begun, and somehow Lucas had changed everything without even trying. The night air felt different now, heavier with thought and possibility. Laura's steps back to her apartment were slower than before, as if the pavement itself had become sticky with the memory of their conversation. Every time she tried to push Lucas out of her mind, a fragment of their discussion replayed, a smile, a quiet laugh, the way his eyes had held hers a moment too long. At home, she kicked off her shoes and sank into the sofa, her mind still wandering. The clock ticked past 11:45 p.m., and yet sleep felt impossible. She stared at the ceiling, letting the events of the evening settle like dust around her thoughts. Lucas, the man she had known in passing for so long, had suddenly become someone who occupied space in her mind that she hadn't realized was empty. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number at first, but then she recognized the number. It was Lucas. "Hope you got home safely. That was unexpected tonight." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Should she respond immediately, or should she wait and pretend calm? She typed, erased, and finally settled on a simple reply. Made it safe. Unexpected, yes. A subtle smile curved her lips, even though she knew it was probably too early to read anything more into a text. She put the phone aside, her thoughts looping back to the cafe. She remembered the way he had listened when she spoke, as if every word mattered. Lara rose to make herself a cup of tea, and as she poured the hot water, her mind drifted to the future. What did this mean for them? Was it a coincidence, or was it more, some small nudge of life pushing them together? She tried to convince herself that she was overthinking, yet the warmth of his gaze kept replaying in her mind. The tea steam swirled around her face, soft and fragrant, and she let herself breathe it in, trying to calm the flurry of emotions. Sometimes life offered moments like this, sudden pauses that left her wondering why she had rushed so often before. Maybe tonight was one of those moments, a rare interruption in the mundane rhythm of days. As she sipped her tea, she recalled his words about fate and nudges. They had sounded so simple, yet they lingered, insinuating that life could be quieter, more thoughtful, if one only paid attention. It was a strange feeling, being unsettled and comforted at the same time. Lara's thoughts drifted to memories of her past acquaintances, fleeting interactions that never seemed to matter until someone resurfaced unexpectedly. How many small chances had she missed because she hadn't stopped long enough to notice? Lucas had reminded her tonight that even casual connections could hold weight if given the right moment. The clock ticked closer to midnight, and Lara felt a shiver that wasn't entirely from the cold. There was something unsettled, fragile, in the way her heart fluttered. It was not fear, nor sadness. It was anticipation, a whisper of curiosity that refused to be silenced. A soft knock at her door startled her. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her heart raced, a mixture of surprise and caution. Who could it be at this hour? Peering through the peephole, her breath caught. It was Lucas, standing there with a hesitant expression and a small folded piece of paper in his hand. "I know it's late," he said, his voice careful, "but I thought you might want to see this." She opened the door slowly, letting him in. The air between them was charged with the quiet tension of unspoken thoughts. He handed her the note. Inside were a few lines of casual sketches and doodles he had made over the months, tiny observations about the neighborhood, snippets of thoughts he had jotted down, almost like a private diary. "Thought you might like to see what I see when I wander," he said, shifting from one foot to another, a rare nervousness in his demeanor. Lara looked down at the sketches, and a warmth spread through her chest. It was intimate in the most innocent way, sharing a piece of himself without words, quietly inviting her into his world. She looked up, meeting his gaze, and felt the depth of his sincerity. Time seemed to stretch as they stood there, in the muted glow of her apartment light. It was a moment that carried no pressure, yet it weighed heavily in the most profound way. She realized then that some encounters weren't about what was said, but about presence, the mere fact of someone being quietly attentive in a chaotic world. Lucas cleared his throat. "I should probably go. Don't want to intrude." Lara hesitated, not wanting him to leave, yet not knowing what to say. The night had shifted something inside her, a delicate, unspoken connection that she couldn't yet define. As he stepped toward the door, she felt a tug of curiosity, a quiet question lingering. What would happen tomorrow if they allowed tonight's moment to echo into the daylight? The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving her alone with the sketches and a fluttering sense of something she could neither name nor ignore. The morning sun seeped through the thin curtains, painting Lara's room in soft shades of gold. She sat on the edge of her bed, the sketches Lucas had left still clutched in her hands. Somehow the quiet intricacy of his little drawings and notes had unsettled her more than she expected. It wasn't just about curiosity. It was about understanding someone in a way she hadn't before. Her phone buzzed on the bedside table, and she hesitated before picking it up. It was a text from Lucas again. "Morning. Hope you slept well. Maybe we can meet at the cafe again later today?" Lara's fingers hovered above the keyboard. She felt a small fluttering excitement in her chest. For months, their encounters had been casual, polite, almost perfunctory, and now it was as if life had opened a new chapter without warning. She typed back, "Morning. That sounds nice. What time?" The reply came quickly.
2:30 p.m., if that works for you." She smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't expected from a simple text. The day stretched before her with a strange possibility of connection, something quiet but undeniable. Laura went about her morning routine, but her mind kept wandering to the sketches, to the softness of Lucas's smile, to the subtle attentiveness in his voice last night. By the time 2:30 p.m. arrived, Laura felt a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. She arrived early at the cafe, the familiar scent of coffee and vanilla wrapping around her like a comfortable blanket. The bell above the door chimed, and she looked up, heart skipping a beat. Lucas was already there, seated at their usual corner table, flipping through a small notebook. He looked up and smiled when he saw her, and Laura felt a strange reassurance in that simple gesture. It was as though the previous night hadn't been a fleeting moment, but the beginning of something quietly significant. "Good afternoon," he said, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. "Good afternoon," Laura replied, sliding into the seat. The air between them was calm, but filled with an undercurrent of curiosity. They ordered their drinks, and the conversation began as naturally as it had the night before. They spoke of mundane things at first, the weather, work, a new book Laura had been reading. But beneath the surface, something unspoken flowed between them. It was the awareness of each other's presence, the quiet recognition that these moments mattered. At one point, Lucas leaned slightly closer, glancing at her sketches from last night. "You looked thoughtful when you saw these," he said softly. "I was," Laura admitted. "It's rare for someone to notice small things, things that seem insignificant but mean a lot." He nodded, understanding her without needing further explanation. There was a gravity in his attention, a sincerity that left her feeling both seen and unguarded. For a fleeting second, the outside world ceased to exist, and only the two of them, the quiet cafe, and the warmth of their shared space remained. Laura couldn't help but reflect on how unexpected this all was. He had always been someone she considered an acquaintance, a neighbor she nodded to at gatherings, exchanged brief words with at community events. And yet, here he was, stepping into a private corner of her life, making ordinary moments feel extraordinary. Lucas spoke again, breaking her reverie. "I've been meaning to ask, do you often notice things other people overlook? The small details, the unnoticed gestures?" Laura laughed softly, shaking her head. "I guess maybe more than I should, but you notice them too, don't you? That's why I think these sketches felt special." He sighed, a little wistful. "I guess I just like to observe. There's something peaceful in it, watching life quietly, without rushing. And sometimes sharing it makes it feel less lonely." Her chest warmed at the honesty in his words. There was no pretense, no expectation, just simple truth. Laura realized that the connection they were forming was delicate, built on attentiveness and understanding, rather than grand gestures or declarations. As they finished their drinks, a sudden chill from the open door made Laura pull her coat tighter. She realized how quickly time had passed, how easy it was to become absorbed in moments like this. She glanced at Lucas and noticed the same reflective look in his eyes, an awareness that this ordinary afternoon had become something quietly memorable. When it was time to leave, she felt a subtle reluctance, the soft ache of parting from someone unexpectedly significant. The walk back to her apartment was quiet, her thoughts replaying fragments of their conversation, the way he listened, the little smiles, the unexpected warmth of shared silence. That night, as Laura prepared for bed, she realized her mind kept returning to him, circling around small details, his laughter, his gentle attentiveness, the calm presence he carried. Something had shifted, quietly, in the span of a few fleeting hours. And she couldn't help but wonder, what if tonight held more than a conversation, more than sketches and coffee? What if it held a truth neither of them had yet dared to name? The following evening, Laura found herself walking toward the cafe again, her steps hesitant yet purposeful. The winter air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of damp leaves and distant smoke from chimneys. She realized she was aware of every sound, the distant hum of a passing car, the rustle of paper bags from a nearby shop, even the faint clink of dishes inside the cafe. Lucas was already there when she arrived, seated by the corner table, flipping through the small notebook he carried with him the day before. When their eyes met, a quiet smile passed between them. Neither needed words to acknowledge the subtle significance of this meeting. It had become a small ritual, a private thread connecting two lives in a world that often moved too fast to notice. "Evening," he said softly. "Glad you could make it." "Evening," she replied, sliding into the chair opposite him.
She felt the warmth of familiarity mingled with a delicate tension, an awareness that tonight might carry more weight than the previous encounters. They began with casual conversation, but it quickly drifted into more personal territories, stories from childhood, fleeting regrets, and small moments of joy. Lara found herself laughing more freely than she had in weeks, the sound feeling natural, unrestrained. Lucas listened with a quiet attentiveness, his occasional interjections thoughtful and precise. At one point, he pulled out a small piece of paper and handed it to her. Lara unfolded it carefully. It was a short list of places he often visited when he needed to think: a small park by the river, a quiet bench overlooking the city skyline, a tiny second-hand bookstore tucked into a side street. Each location had a note beside it, a few words capturing the feeling of the space. "I thought you might like to see where I wander," he said, almost shyly. "Places that feel grounding." Lara studied the list, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't a grand gesture or a dramatic revelation. It was a simple invitation to understand him more deeply, to share a part of his world that was private and thoughtful. She felt a quiet tenderness in the way he offered it, as if trusting her with these small fragments of his life. "Thank you," she whispered, meeting his gaze. He shrugged modestly. "I just think some things are better shown than said. You noticed the sketches yesterday. I thought you might understand these too." The evening wore on, and the cafe began to empty. The air grew quieter, punctuated only by the occasional scrape of a chair or the soft hiss of the coffee machine. Lara noticed how naturally she had come to anticipate his words, how comfortable she felt in his presence. For someone she had considered merely an acquaintance, Lucas had quietly become someone she valued, someone whose company felt reassuring. At one point, she glanced outside the window. The streetlights glimmered on the wet pavement, reflecting tiny pools of amber light. "It's strange," she said softly, "how someone can feel familiar, yet still bring new perspectives." Lucas nodded, looking out the window thoughtfully. "I think we often underestimate the quiet influence of people who don't demand attention. Sometimes they leave the strongest impressions." Lara felt a lump in her throat, a subtle recognition of truth in his words. She had always been drawn to moments that carried hidden weight, to small gestures that spoke volumes. Lucas had reminded her that meaningful connections didn't always arrive with fanfare. They could emerge softly, persistently, like an unspoken understanding. As they prepared to leave, a sudden chill swept through the cafe. Lara tugged her coat closer, realizing she wasn't ready for this night to end.
The quiet pull toward Lucas lingered, a subtle question she hadn't dared to articulate aloud. Walking together to the street, they talked in murmurs, their conversation light but tinged with unspoken meaning. Each step felt measured, as if both were aware that this night had become more than casual companionship. It carried the gentle weight of a connection neither wanted to name just yet. When they reached her building, Lucas hesitated, as if weighing the right words. "Lara, I'm glad we did this. These moments, they mean a lot to me." She smiled, the warmth in her chest growing. "Me too, Lucas, more than I realized." They exchanged a quiet nod, a mutual understanding lingering in the space between them. As he turned to leave, she couldn't help but feel a subtle ache of anticipation, a curiosity about what the next encounter might reveal. Standing alone in the dimly lit street, Lara realized how deeply the quiet moments had already rooted themselves in her heart, and she knew, with a mix of trepidation and hope, that the story of tonight was far from over. The weekend had arrived with a quiet, lingering chill, and Lara found herself once again walking toward the cafe,
though this time with a subtle sense of anticipation she couldn't quite define. The street was empty, the air sharp against her cheeks, and yet each step toward that familiar corner felt lighter than the last. She wasn't just going for coffee anymore. She was going for the conversation, the quiet understanding, the presence that had become a small anchor in her otherwise ordinary days. Lucas was already there when she arrived, seated in the corner with his notebook open. When he looked up and saw her, a gentle smile spread across his face, the kind that carried warmth without pretense. Lara returned the smile, feeling a quiet flutter of familiarity and comfort in the ease between them. "Good morning," he said softly, his voice steady and reassuring. "Good morning," she replied, settling into the chair opposite him. For a moment, neither spoke, and it felt natural, the silence a companion rather than a void. Their drinks arrived, and the conversation began slowly, weaving between casual remarks and more personal reflections. They spoke of books, of music, of the little joys and frustrations of everyday life. Lara noticed how effortless it had become to share small pieces of herself, to let her thoughts flow freely, and how Lucas listened with genuine interest. It was a quiet intimacy, built not on grand gestures, but on attention, care, and shared understanding. At one point, Lucas closed his notebook and looked at her with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said, "I never imagined we'd spend so much time together like this. It's different, but good different." Lara nodded, feeling a warmth spread in her chest. "Yes," she said softly. "It's strange how someone you barely know can suddenly feel so familiar, so easy to talk to." He smiled, a flicker of something unspoken in his eyes. "I think it's moments like this that make life interesting, the ones you don't plan for, the ones that surprise you quietly." She took a sip of her coffee, savoring the warmth and the comfort it brought. Lara realized that the surprises Lucas brought weren't dramatic or overbearing. They were small, thoughtful, and meaningful, and somehow they had left a lasting impression on her heart. The afternoon wore on, the cafe slowly emptying around them, yet neither seemed ready to leave, caught in the quiet rhythm of shared presence. Lara found herself reflecting on how far things had come, from a chance encounter in the corner cafe to afternoons like this, where time itself seemed to slow. "Do you ever think about how some connections just happen?" Lara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Even if you didn't expect them, even if you didn't realize you needed them." Lucas nodded slowly. "All the time. And sometimes those connections are the ones that matter most, because they teach you something about patience, observation, and care." Lara felt a gentle warmth in her chest. She had always believed in small gestures, subtle signs, and quiet moments that carried hidden meaning. And now she understood that Lucas had become a part of that belief, not through overt acts, but through presence, thoughtfulness, and the unspoken reassurance that someone cared enough to notice. As they finally prepared to leave, the late afternoon sunlight streamed through the cafe windows, casting a soft glow over the table between them. Lara realized she had grown to cherish these afternoons, the way he made ordinary moments feel quietly extraordinary. Outside, the wind had softened, and they walked together a few steps in companionable silence. Then, as they reached the edge of the street, Lucas turned toward her. "Lara, I'm really glad we met again, tonight and all the nights before. I think I'd like to continue this, whatever it is, if you're open to it." She smiled, a mix of relief and quiet joy bubbling inside her. "I'd like that," she said simply. "I really would." He nodded, and for a moment they just stood there, taking in the street, the fading sunlight, the quiet sense of possibility. There was no rush, no pressure, just understanding, shared presence, and the gentle certainty that something meaningful had begun. As Lara returned to her apartment that evening, she felt a peaceful weight in her chest. The unexpected encounter, the sketches, the quiet afternoons, it all had led to this moment, a gentle realization that life could surprise her with connection, even when she least expected it. Sitting by the window, she watched the city lights flicker to life and felt a soft gratitude for the night, the cafe, and Lucas, the acquaintance who had quietly shifted the shape of her world. And as sleep finally crept in, Lara allowed herself a small, contented smile, knowing that some moments, once discovered, stay with you far longer than you ever imagine. The quiet of the night wrapped around her, and for the first time in a long while, she felt truly at ease, ready for whatever unfolded next.